Welcome back. So this is actually episode 76 of the Grindhouse podcast. We took a little bit of a break, took a little bit of a summer hiatus. We took a break from the podcast, but we've actually been working a lot on the Lynn Hip Hop Wall of Fame. I'm sure I'll be talking about that throughout this podcast a little bit more. But I'm happy to be back. I have a couple special guests. This isn't your typical podcast. Typically, we like to bring on musicians, hip hop artists from Lynn and the Boston, area. But today, we have more of a, I guess we can call it sort of more of a political podcast in the sense because that's what's happening in the city. Obviously, we represent Lynn. Both Crit and I, Crit is behind the camera today for this podcast. Obviously, both of us are from Lynn and have a huge connection to the city. So we actually brought on a couple guests. Our first guest to all the way to the right of me is Marven Hyppolite, right? Is that how you pronounce it?
It's pronounced Hyppolite, but
right.
We'll take it.
All right, word.
The H is silent. That's tough. People.
All right. I wasn't trying to butcher because I was like, for the longest time, I was saying Marven Hyppolite, like Hyppolite.
I get that a lot too. He real polite. Yeah.
Marven, can you let us know what you're doing? Let us know what you're doing.
Yeah. So my name's Marven Hyppolite. Lynn resident. Been involved with a lot of local activists and nonprofits. Mostly involved with Neighbor to Neighbor and the New Lynn Coalition. Spent some time working with the congressman, and I've been running for local office in Lynn for City Council in Ward 5. And then this year I've been running for councilor at large.
Dope. And so to the immediate right of me, I have Jonathon Feinberg. Jonathon, what do you do?
Thanks. I'm the director of organizing and development for the New Lynn Coalition, and I'm also a musician in Lynn, rock and roll band and a folk band.
Tigerman Woah.
Tigermanwoah.com.
Yeah. So I guess the first thing I want to get into because one of the things, especially, so we've been, Crit and I with Grindhouse have been working on a project, actually kind of getting a lot of the other hip hop collectives in Lynn kind of coming together for a mural that we've been doing. And the biggest reason why, in my opinion, that mural is important to me and the people involved in the mural is because we're preserving something I feel like in Lynn that's gone underappreciated, I would say, but also needs the recognition, especially in the face of what's been happening in Lynn. If you notice, if you walked around Lynn anytime recently, that you'll notice a lot of new buildings and construction going on. And if you look at the prices for those buildings and constructions in those rooms, you would see that is a lot of money to be able to move into those places. And so I think that the writing is on the wall about what's happening in the city, which is why the project that we have been working on the Lynn Hip Hop Wall of Fame has been created because there's a beautiful culture that's happening in Lynn that I feel like is being threatened by the developmental properties that's been coming up and pushing the culture of Lynn and putting that in jeopardy. And so we created that project to help preserve, the natural organic movement that's been happening in Lynn that's in danger of disappearing possibly in a matter of years. But I first want to kind of get your thoughts on, as people in Lynn, as residents of Lynn, what is your perspective on what's been happening?
I mean, the only reason I'm kind of, pushing so hard in running for office and changing the narrative is because, it's happening to me. It's happening to my family. So about 6 years ago, I came back from school. I was at UMass Dartmouth. And, I was just noticing that my moms and my father, my sister, my friends, everybody was just kind of really struggling with the rising cost of rent, and there was other stuff going on in Lynn, obviously. But that really kind of shook me a little bit because, I'm out in the real world now looking for a job, trying to, claim my independence. And you can't even do that. I had 4 friends so far this past year just leave the city because they got priced out. I had to leave downtown because I got priced out. And it really does feel like the city is just trying to make a buck without necessarily considering the people, like you said, like who make the city great, who bring that culture.
Yeah, I think you really got it with so much of the city being unrecognized and underappreciated, right? And uninvested, right? There's so much that we could do. We have such a beautiful city. There's so much history. There's so much diversity. There's so many cultures coming together, creating new things. You know, it's harder and harder to stay there. I've lived in Lynn 10 years, just about. I own my house. The taxes go up every year. I don't see anything back from that at all, except a higher tax bill the next time around. The city council isn't responsive. You know, I think one interesting thing about Marvin's campaign is he's the only renter who's running for office, right? Out of an 11-person city council, every single one of them currently owns a property. And when you look at the numbers in Lynn, right, on average, for renters versus homeowners, there's a $50,000 income difference, right? So there's just a completely different reality that the people who are running our city live in, right? We have two Lynns. There's a rich Lynn and a poor Lynn, right? There's a white Lynn and a people of color Lynn. We recently had a housing plan that showed all that. Put good numbers to it, made a good map out of it. So, yeah, and it's hard to make that change. It's hard to fight big dollars, you know?
Yeah, I actually was talking to Marvin about this before you rolled up, about like why I appreciate what you do. People like Cinda Don, shout out Cinda,
Yeah,
Allison Miller, shout out Allison.
Ali.
You know, I would say like the younger generation of thinkers in Lynn, because I feel like when I was growing up in Lynn, I felt like Lynn was more of an older type of kind of city. And now I feel like we have so many people, us, you know, who kind of represent Lynn, who are the younger generation of thinkers who, you know, have either left the city to, you know, go to college, do whatever we have to do, and then came back and want to see, obviously, our city improve. And it's been great kind of like getting to know you guys, getting to see what you do, and also being inspired by what you guys do. Because that absolutely inspires what I do. And so like, it's great to kind of see the younger minds kind of come in and, you know, wanting to see a better version of the city. Because like I was saying before, I feel like for the longest time, like the people who run the city are representing a different generation, which may not represent what's happening currently. And so I guess on that aspect, like what do you feel like you bring to the table that separates you from, you know, other candidates, or what you offer in terms of like a vision for what the city could be?
I mean, well, number one, you know, I'm the youngest person running for office in the city, you know. And again, my background, you know, my folks are from Haiti. I spent some time there, so I have that immigrant experience. I can communicate in 4 different languages. So, you know, I'm not scared to, you know, go up to a Spanish speaker's door or French speaker's door, you know. And then, like, let's keep it real. Like John was talking about, like, there is 2 Lynns. You know, I grew up downtown. Like, it's the hood. Let's keep it a buck. Not too many politicians are going there to knock doors. You know, I do both. I go to those places that they're too scared to go to, and then I go up to Ward 1. I go to Pine Hill. I'm at their door too. And I think also, you know, just, you know, my education, I think really, you know, helped me out as well, because, you know, my mom sacrificed a lot for me able to go to school and learn. And I feel like, you know, my time at the congressman's office and going to other cities and seeing how they do things kind of gives me a fresh perspective, you know, because, you know, when I come to Lynn, one of the things that's really frustrating me is like 80% of the city doesn't vote in local elections. And, you know, our campaign, we got a vision to plug those people in and actually give them a say and empower them so that they can make those changes.
Word. You know, one thing that comes to mind, because I agree, like, and I wouldn't say like I've obviously know the importance of voting, but I would say that time and time again I've been disappointed with my vote. And that obviously doesn't incentivize me to keep voting when I feel like my vote continuously doesn't matter. Just kicking it back to you, like, how would you kind of incentivize people? Like, how do you incentivize the people who aren't voting to want to come out and vote when that's such a big problem?
I'm not gonna lie to you, brother. It's tough because, you know, the people we talk to, John and I, you know, they're people, they're disenfranchised. They already don't trust the system. Like I was just telling you earlier, I was just knocking doors and this older woman was like, I seen you here before. My rent's still going up. I don't trust it. You know, so it's a part of it is really building that trust, going back, knowing that you're not going to get them on the first time. And then by doing that, going back and showing them that you're sincere, tying it back to how it's all connected, because a lot of people can't see how it's connected. They can't see how that new building or these murals is going to affect your rent, you know? So it's part of, so it's 2-pronged. It's building that trust and then showing them how the things happening, the decisions happening behind closed doors affects them.
I feel like there's two things that come to mind when I think of politicians. There's and I feel like I want to just get both of you guys' sense on this. Is like there's one there's two ways I feel like of doing politics. There's the person who is for the people and really represents the people, and gets the people to kind of really support their cause, and then there's the person who's relying on power, i.e., whether that be cash, money, or organizations, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not here to name names or say who's doing what, but from your perspective, in terms of you've ran before, right?
That's right.
And so, can you let us know in terms of when it comes to running? Do you feel like the people's voice are actually heard, or do you feel like the money is heard more than the people's voices? I'm curious.
Oh man, right now, as things stand,
you drive around Lynn, by the way, and you see, you see what you see, you think about how much money it costs to all I'm saying. So anyway,
money's huge. Money talks, and like I mentioned earlier, when you have a situation where 80% of the city doesn't vote, doesn't understand the power that they have, the money's gonna talk. We got people power, right? But the problem is a lot of our people, sadly, they're hurt, they're traumatized, or they just don't know, so they'll sleep a little bit, and so right as it stands right now, the money's talking, but you see what's going on in the past 4 or 5 years. You got people like myself, John, Cinda, Ali, Isaac Holds, shout out to Lynn United for Change, whole bunch of cats stepping up. Even in the hip hop world, shout out my man ST, Knacking them, Cash, all of them, they're coming around, they're putting that message in their music. So you see that starting to change a bit, so we're really trying to wake people up. It's the people power that should reign supreme. But for right now, until we can wake up to the power that we have, the money's going to keep talking.
Yeah, I'm curious, Jonathan, on what you think, especially from an artist perspective, because you're not only do what you do, but also you're in a band, you're a musician in the city. So how do you feel in terms of the people's voice versus the money, and who's being heard more?
Well, the people need more money. Mm-hmm. I'm going to start with that. Donations for the committee to elect Marven Hyppolite are very welcome. Mailers cost a lot of money. Hand cards cost a lot of money. Running an election costs a lot of money. Paying people to work for you costs a lot of money. We don't have it. Right? We have people power, right? But how many of those people are going to show up to vote at the end of the day? How do you get them to vote? I mean, I think Marvin's really right on point with that. There's a lot of people who are who've tried before, it didn't work. So why keep trying? Why keep doing the same thing over and over if it doesn't ever benefit you? But then, if you don't like the conditions that you're presented with, what are you doing to change those conditions? Right? What are you speaking about? What are you doing with your time? Are you just talking about it, or are you doing something about it? What organizations have you joined? What kind of meetings are you going to? How hard do you try to get your voice heard? Now, I know it's not easy to get to some planning meeting at the Lynn Museum at 3:00 in the afternoon. You got a job, I get it. But when you can, where you can. You give $15 to the kids trying to get money up for their jerseys or whatever. You can give $15 to a political candidate. You can give an hour of your time to a community meeting. We all make choices like that every day, and it can be hard. I get that. I totally do. But if you don't like what you're presented with, you have to work to change that. You can't just accept it for what it is and let that happen, because you keep letting that happen, and you're not going to be able to let that happen anymore. They're going to kick us all out.
Sad facts. Sad facts.
And as an artist, I think we do have somewhat of a responsibility to talk about that. And to try to incorporate that kind of message into our art.
Absolutely, I agree. You know, so one thing that I really enjoyed about what you bringing up earlier was your idea for the city council meetings, because it's like when you think about ways to incentivize people to get involved, I feel like that's an excellent idea. You want to just kick that idea real quick, just to kind of just get the ideas flowing, because I feel like that's what we need, you know, because it is like what you're saying, Jonathan, is true. Like it's like the incentive should be like you want to see the positive changes in your city, especially reflecting who you are, you know, as somebody who is a resident of the city, but you have to get involved in order to do it. I like what your thought process was, because you're like, oh, it's almost like an incentive, like a reason to show up, even if it benefits you. Here's a more incentive. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, so it's something that my team and I are really thinking about. But, I love bonfires. I love bringing people together around that vibe. John loves that. He's an incredible guitarist, by the way. But, for me, my ideal city council meeting, it would be, we're right on Lynn Beach. We dig out a nice big fire pit with some sand furniture. You know what I mean? It's like a communal thing. And, we host a city council meeting there with a bonfire. And maybe we got some food and people just walking by. And, it sounds silly on the surface, but what you're doing is you're making it easy for people to participate. You're creating that community. You're walking by, walking your dog on the beach. What's going on over here? This is city council. Well, what's a city councilor? Well, they make up the laws for the city. They represent you. What part of the city you live in? That's your councilor. Oh, I didn't know that. What they talking about today? Well, they're going to be voting on a budget. How much is it going to be? $410 million. I didn't know that, And all of a sudden, the bells go off, and it's more attainable. Because it's like you host these things at, like, City Hall. First of all, how many brothers feel comfortable approaching City Hall?
But seriously, though, that's a very good point. That's absolutely a great point.
It's intimidating. There's a lot of cats in the city. Maybe they speak English, but maybe not that well.
This is a reason why I like how you approach your campaign, because I feel like you make it easy for the people to understand what's happening. And I'll give you an example of that in a second. But just what you were saying, I feel like when you go into those city council meetings, it can feel bureaucratic. It could feel like, a little, and it's just, I don't think, especially when you're representing the community, it just doesn't feel like there's a human connection there. It feels more like, you're almost presenting, in front of Congress.
Oh, dude, they have a wall up. Between the audience and the counselors.
So it's like when you represent the people, I feel like that's not a good representation of how you engage with people. So I like that idea a lot, because it's like, let's go where the people are. Let's make it fun, because like, why not? You know what I'm saying? Like, why can't we vote on something and also make it feel more communal, more like, inclusive than, you have to go up and, present in front of a whole people standing in a chair higher than you are, looking down at you, and it just feels, I don't know. It like you said, like especially when you come from a certain background, it just feels like this is a place that's gonna get your heart pumping, 100. So I like that idea, and also in terms of what I wanted to say to you is, like, I had a friend. I went to your backyard shindig that you had last Friday, which was dope. Shout outs to you guys for having such a great gathering. And my friend who I invited, he's actually not from Lynn, but he got to engage and hang out and get to know you guys. And he said one thing he liked about you was the fact that, and he understood what gentrification was beforehand, but the way you walked and approached and engaged him in terms of like the problems of the city, the way you approached, came from an understanding of like, you may not know or you may know, but if you don't know, let me tell it to you in a way that you can understand it. And that communication of being able to connect with somebody and be like, hey, do you know what's happening in your city? And really break it down, so you're not like just using big buzzwords and trying to get people going off of buzzwords, which is obviously politically today is very huge, obviously, using buzzwords, whether it be, Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, whatever. It's like what's happening in a city, and really focusing and trying to get your message to really kind of make people understand. And just the way you're able to convey that message without using big buzzwords and really kind of breaking it down for people is what he really appreciated. So I don't know. I feel like that's important, especially when you're representing the people. You got to.
Yeah, no, we work real hard on that. John and I, I have an idea, and thank God, John and then our campaign manager, also his wife, Rebecca Hornstein, shout out to her. We work real hard on that, because it's like, we'll have an idea. We went to school, we understand the theory, but we're trying to wake up working class people. Can't go over there, beat them over the head with a book. That's not how you bring people in. So we work real hard on that, on making the message as easy to understand as possible, because it is And you know, and people get I was talking to a brother last week about this. Like he was saying, you know, I see the issues that are going on. I just feel like I got to let somebody in the suit handle it. And I'm like, damn, dude, like that's not how it's supposed to be. Like your lived experience, you know more than a lot of these suits. I've been in these meetings with some of these electeds, and I'm like, God damn, like these dudes really don't know. You know what I'm saying? So making it easy for people to understand and connecting it to their lived experiences, I think, really gets the message across.
How would you, like, for people who don't understand what's happening and like the risk involved in, I guess, not exercising their right to vote or using their voice, like, how would you explain to them the risk that they're taking by just like, I don't know, going blasé and just being like, you know, that guy in the suit's going to handle things for me. Like, what is the risk of allowing that power to continue?
I mean, your livelihood, you know, is survival. Because, you know, I tell people all the time, like, you know, if it's like national politics, like the presidential stuff, if you don't want to participate in that, I can't really fault you for that. But in a city or a town that you live in, where you likely grew up with some of these people that are in office, you could get them on a cell phone, and you're choosing not to do that. Well, guess who's making that decision for you? Like let's keep it a buck. I was running in Ward 5 downtown, mostly folks of color, poor white folks. It's the hood. Ward 5 also included a piece of Pine Hill. If you know Lynn, you know Pine Hill's mostly, you know, it's nice. Streets are paved. People, you know, probably don't even lock their doors.
It's on the hill, you know.
It's on the hill. Nice people, beautiful people.
Yeah.
If you don't vote downtown, you don't make your voice heard, somebody up there is making that choice for you. Do they truly understand what you're going through? I got back from school, not even a week, and there was already a shooting on Washington Street. I seen somebody OD'd. It's not happening up there. You know, we all want the same things, but damn, I would like somebody that understands what's going on down there. So if you're not speaking your mind, somebody's making that choice for you. And are you okay with some stranger, somebody you don't know, somebody who doesn't understand who you are, what you're going through, making a decision for you?
Word. All right, I gotta now kind of turn it to the more musical aspects of these things, because obviously Grindhouse, we represent, you know, the Lynn Hip Hop culture especially. And one thing, when you talk about hip hop in general, especially hip hop in Lynn, one of the things that I hear a lot about is the lack of support generally from city officials, even from the community, you know, in terms of like, you know, typically wanting these rappers to be like famous before they support them. Yeah. City officials feeling like it's too dangerous of a genre to really support. And venues also feeling like it's just too dangerous of a genre to really kind of host shows in or whatever, and creating a lot of limitations to be able to have hip hop shows. As somebody that's running for a councilor position, like what are you able to do to help us kind of in the fight, help artists in the fight to try to get not just their voices heard, but just like to get them the support that they need to allow their hobbies. A lot of them, you know, are doing it for the love of it, but also they can do it for the, you know, they can make money off of it, some serious money off of it, if the city supported them enough, have venues for them to perform in. What can we do to kind of create that?
I mean, for me, and I've been talking to a lot of spitters in the city about this. And, you know, I kind of dabble on the beats myself. I'm not good, so don't ask me for a beat. but you know, for me, the number one glaring thing is, why don't we have a communal studio? It's crazy to me.
That's true.
We got all these empty like buildings and whatnot. You mean to tell me we couldn't find a grant to get a communal studio? And then you could probably even fund it with like cheap monthly fees, $20 or something. It's crazy to me.
That's exactly.
Yeah, no, it's wild. And then, you know, the other piece that we always talk about is the fact that you don't know what you don't know. So if you don't have a politician or councilor knocking your door telling you, hey, you know, these are the resources. Hey, did you know that you could apply for a block party, right? Like, why isn't my councilor, you know what I'm saying, like helping me throw a block party, help me throw a festival? And then to the culture piece, this is why representation matters, you know, because it's like, you know, we understand that hip hop is not what you see necessarily on the TV. You know what I mean? It's not all Migos or whatnot, right? And so if you don't have somebody in office, again, if you don't vote locally, you're going to get, a city council or a mayor that thinks that, it's the devil's music, stunting your growth.
Yeah.
So just right there. But like for me, yeah, those three things, like, as a counselor, one thing I'd like to see, definitely a communal studio. I'd work with the artists to make sure that there were more block parties so that they could showcase their talents. And then, from there, like finding ways to empower them so that they can continue on with that project.
Yeah, the other thing I hear, and that's thank you, because that would be amazing. I feel like that would help the culture so much if if we were to put that into motion. The other thing I hear, because we were gracious enough to get a grant for our mural. The shout out to the Lynn Cultural Council for gifting us with a grant to be able to make that project happen. And then in conversations with people, they were like, "Whoa, I didn't even know that we could apply for grants through the city and make something happen." So which makes me think, and makes a lot of people think, like, why isn't there, like, especially like if you're invested in what's happening in Lynn, you should know that there's a rich hip hop culture happening in Lynn. You should have some idea that there are musicians in the city who take their craft seriously. And there's a lot of, not just in hip hop, in a lot of different genres, there's a lot of artists and musicians in the city that we should figure out ways to support. And, them not knowing that there's grants available to create something that could be potentially huge and meaningful to a lot of people, like that seems like an important like a huge oversight. And so, one thing, somebody, threw this idea out there, shout out to Jay Moon. He's like, why isn't there part of the these grants available for music, like making sure that the musical scene in Lynn is thriving, so like, sure, we have like, Massachusetts or whatever gives us a certain pool of money for arts in Lynn. Why don't we make sure that a certain amount of that money is going to the musical part of Lynn, because that is huge. And so that's another thing I just wanted to bring out there is like, people have thought about that because, grants are important and people didn't know that was a thing that they could do,
Yeah, man. I mean, that's what John and I are here for. Like, a lot of what we do is, education, like civic engagement, political education work. And a lot of people think it's just like, the potholes and stuff like that. But it really ties into, the arts as well and mental health, so many things.
Yeah. Like having somebody that has an accurate read of the culture. And this is what I bring it back to, like having somebody that represents the generation of Lynn that's really coming to, which is the younger generation, the our age, people in their 30s who have been in Lynn for a while and now are really kind of hitting their stride, buying homes, really kind of hitting that footing in their careers, having more of a voice and confident in the voice that they have. Like, this is important for us to be like, yo, like, you guys have been running your situation. It seems nice. You guys have been pocketing nicely, but what about us? What about the working class folk? What about the folk that has been in the city grinding away and finally has something to say? So, anyway, that's, something I want to say. I mean, I appreciate what you guys are doing.
Well, it's back to a question of investment, right?
Mm-hmm.
We gave a $2.5 million tax break to a developer from Swampscott, I believe. Yeah. Michael Procopio, to build a 10-story luxury building on what used to be a community garden in downtown Lynn, right? Mm. What else could we do with that $2.5 million? Or what else could we have done with that land? And what say did we have in any of that? 11 people made the decision to give that $2.5 million tax break. 11 people. There's a lot more of us than there are of them, right? We just got to be willing to do something about it. And I think there's a lot of opportunities too, right? We finally have a planning department. We're the only fucking city of 100,000 people I've ever heard of that didn't have a planning department, ever. We don't have a master plan. I mean, I went to school to be a city planner, right? Every city that I have ever heard of, over like 50,000 people, has a master plan, has a planning department. Salem has 60,000 residents roughly. They have a fully staffed planning department with at least 8 people working at all times. Lynn finally has 3. Finally, we didn't have anybody for 40 years.
How does that happen?
It was a question of where we invest. Where do we put our energy? Where do we put our money? Right? And if we don't get people who actually understand what we're going through and can actually like carry through a vision into office, then what are we doing? And
so for, just because you went to school for city plan, so I'm going to ask you this question. For people who may not have an idea of what why is it important to have a city planner? Why is it important to have a city planner?
So I also made a very intentional choice to not actually be a city planner. So
Oh.
there's a little bit. If you're a city planner, you work for the city, right? Effectively, you work for the mayor, and your job is to take sort of like a 100,000-foot view of the city, right? Try to think of the whole thing together. Try to think about what the people who live here want, what the people who live here need. Where are there gaps in resources, right? Where are there too many things happening, right? And how do we make this make a little more sense, right? So do we want to like invest a lot of money into culture in downtown, right? Do we want to figure out how to turn that underground part of Trios into a venue like Middle East downstairs in Cambridge, right? Which we could do. There's a huge space down there. It's sick.
Artists in the city need a venue.
Exactly. If there was the investment, right? But we won't get the investment if we don't have the representation at the end of the day. And that means showing up for the planning meetings. That means getting your voice heard. There's a survey out right now from the planning office. We have an arts and culture planner now. I just met her for the first time the other day. She seems lovely. If you are involved in the arts in any way, I recommend reaching out. They're very friendly people there. It's the friendliest office in City Hall, honestly. They care about listening to you. A planning office should engage in deep community outreach, regardless of campaigns. That's the idea. You want to hear from the people about what they want, what they need, and sort of put that puzzle together and figure out the direction we're going to move and make a plan for that.
So you're telling me for 40 years, there's been nobody that's been critically thinking about how the layout of the city should be kind of laid out, especially when it comes to considering the different classes and backgrounds of the city. For 40 years, there's just been like an empty office where somebody should have been. That's crazy. I'm still like at a loss for words.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And before that, we only had one city planner for a city of what I guess what at the time was probably like 85,000 people, which is not anywhere close to enough. I mean, it's a huge job to have to do. We didn't have anybody at that role. Yeah.
This now makes me think about, and I'm not sure whether those two things tie together, but it does make me think about the fact that from my eyeball perspective, the level, the speed of gentrification that's been happening in the city has been like, 0 to 60 and like, 1.5 seconds fast. Like it feels like it's on an accelerated speed, and it makes so much sense that the fact that there has been no city planner, I don't know if it ties in because I don't know anything about.
No, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. It's not just the city planner. It's also about who's on city council. There's this thing called zoning that kind of determines what kind of buildings for what purposes can go where, right? And they lay that out for the whole city. And as it stands right now, because our city charter is also about 50 years old, hasn't been updated in 50 years, the rules that govern our city. I lost my train of thought.
Importance of city planner.
Right, thank you. Yes. So, this person's coming in looking at the last 50 years of random pieces about this neighborhood, that neighborhood, the waterfront, green space, whatever. None of it fits together. And they have to come in and they have to actually figure out what's going on in our city for real. And we just had this housing plan process that was really good. That was helpful. But these people need our help, frankly. They need us to come tell them what's going on in our lives. The more evidence that we can give them, the more reasons we can give them to do what we need, the easier it'll be. Mm-hmm. And we need city councilors, like I know Marvin will be, who are willing to communicate with them and engage with them and consult with them before they make their vote on whether something can or can't happen.
I saw something. I'm not gonna say the person who said it or wrote it because it's online for anybody to see it. But pretty much, it was very apparent to me that this person who's in the city was a city councilor, heavily ignored a large demographic of people with his comment about the situation when it comes to luxury apartments and gentrification in Lynn. Just off of the comment alone, it was very clear this person could give two shits about a certain demographic of people in the city. And I found that to be just an issue because when you're thinking about, like, if you're representing a whole city, you should be representing everybody and not just the people that, whether it be lining your pockets or representative of what your background is. But this person online is just like, pretty much, those people, it's too bad for them. You can't afford an apartment. It's the market. Boom, get out of here. What would be in terms of like getting, because obviously, as a city council, you should represent everybody. But in terms of like, how to make things fair for everybody especially in the face of what's happening in the city for gentrification? Like, what can you offer? What can you do to help kind of, I wouldn't say stop what's been happening, because I don't think any one person can stop what's been happening, but what can we do? Like, how do we feel better about the situation in Lynn, and what can we do to at least, the very least, slow it down? I know it's a big question. I'm sorry for,
I mean, short answer is get involved, show up. There are protests, there are meetings, there are all kinds of opportunities to get involved. I mean, at the end of the day, the real problem is that our city council has all of the power in the city. Yeah. We have a situation where the city council has more power than the mayor currently, as is set up, and they flex that power. And because of the individuals who are in the various seats, there's no good working relationships there. You want to get something good done, you got to jump through a million hoops. Meanwhile, you can grease a couple palms, you can just get shit done. There's like 10 families that run this city.
And that's always been the problem with especially when it comes to working class and then why the vote, in my opinion anyway, why the vote turnout is always not what you expect, especially when somebody's heavily supported, is like there's always that aspect that it's like it's depressing to realize, but it's like money really makes the world go round. And it's like you like it sucks to see it happening, but it continuously, it seems to happen over and over again. And that kind of process, seeing it happen over and over again, it makes you lose faith in the system that we're in. It really does.
And it's not to say that we don't need investment and that we don't need nice things. I mean, we deserve nice things. We made this city attractive to these developers. We deserve nice things too. Right? You shouldn't be able to go into like a JH1 building or like 501 Washington and see the kind of conditions in there, or like, houses along the commons where their front door doesn't close and the back stairs are just covered in mold, Meanwhile, there's a fucking rooftop pool that none of us are ever going to be able to swim in. Are you fucking kidding me? That's the only pool in the city outside the Y.
Yeah, no.
That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
It's not even that good. $2.5 million tax break. That thing's like 3 feet. That's crazy, bro.
But it's on a rooftop,
Oh man,
it's a rooftop pool. Oh man, yeah, man. It's crazy to think. It's very depressing to think about. I just feel like this is the realities that we're in, and that's why I feel like that's why obviously we have you guys on the podcast, because we're trying to like really get the message out for everyone. I saw what happened recently in the primaries with like Michael Satterwhite, because I really did feel like, he had the pulse of the city. I really did feel like that, at least from my perspective, he had that pulse, and it was shocking to me, what the outcome actually was, because I felt like the whole city was buzzing with, somebody that's represented their community, and I don't know. I felt like, especially after that like we all kind of have to do our part. Especially for your campaign, just to let people know, like, we got to get people who represent us to be a part of the decision making, because we can't let a city council group run and make all the big decisions and literally push us out, without having one of our own at least represent in that room. So again, thank you for coming on and just kind of enlightening us a little bit about what's been happening. And I don't know if there's anything that you want to say. Feel free to tack on.
I mean, I guess like if people are listening, if there's one thing I really just want people to understand, is like, when you look at the state of politics in this country, but just in the city too, it's so easy to just get bogged up in the idea of like, my vote doesn't matter. Whoever gets in, there are leaders. And it's just like, man, that's just the wrong way to think about it. If things are not going well in the city, it's our responsibility to step up and fix it. And you can't let some dudes in a suit in a building intimidate you. The only power they have is the power we give them. The power really is in our hands. If we don't want gentrification, if we stand up, freaking, honestly, all we really need is 20,000 of us. Mm-hmm. There's 100,000 plus. All we really need is 20,000 of us standing up strong, saying, no, we don't want this. It's not going to happen. But we really got to take that first step. We got to show up, and don't be intimidated. Don't feel like you're not smart enough. These dudes use big buzzwords that really don't mean jack shit. Seriously, your lived experience, your life is enough to make the decisions in the city. Because seriously, we all want the same things. You know, we want clean streets. We want to be able to afford the place we live in. We want it to be safe. We want to be able to travel and enjoy nice stuff. You don't need a PhD or anything like that to make that happen. You just gotta have a good heart and good connections. You know, talk with your family, your friends. Get together and start flexing that muscle together. You know, so that's really the message I want to get out.
Word. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan. You got anything you wanna?
I mean, you were talking about Satterwhite, and you know, likes don't vote, and signs don't vote. We saw that with Sear.
Yeah.
Right? People vote. And you know, you voted 100 times and it's never made a difference. I get it. I get it. Believe me. I see the same things you do, but that's like the smallest thing that you could do, really, at the end of the day, is just show up on the day. Polls are open 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. They're not that far from your house. Hit up the campaign. We'll give you a ride if you need a ride. Anytime. We'll help you figure out how to vote early if you want to vote early. But it's the least you can do. You know, I think you want to change shit. You got to change the conditions that you're presented with, and you can bitch about them or you can do something about it.
Yeah.
You know, and you can spend all your time on Facebook and justly and rightly calling people out. You know, and posting facts too. You know, I like all of that shit, but that doesn't get new people in power.
Yeah.
You got to show up, and you got to get your friends to show up. You got to get your family to show up. You know, Marvin's talking about his run in Ward 5. We won 3 out of 4 precincts. Lost by 50 votes. One precinct decided the entire ward, and you know what precinct that was? That was the white precinct. It was the 2-income household precinct. It was the precinct where people own their homes, right? It wasn't where most of us live. 3 out of 4. 3 out of 4. That's not right. 3 out of 4 should win this thing every time. So you got to show up.
Where in terms of how to, I know we talked about it, we mentioned it before, but in terms of supporting you and your campaign, where can people go to get more info?
Check us out at marvenforlynn.com. I should have brought some lit with me. It's Marven, MarvenForlynn.com. You can follow me on Instagram, Marven, my first name, Marven, _FOR _councilor. We have our on our website donation links. Please donate what you can to the campaign. 20, 50, 100, whatever you can.
Max is 1,000. Give 1,000 if you got 1,000. Give 1,000 if you got 1,000.
If you balling like that, throw it towards the campaign, and you can write it off on the taxes or whatnot. Right. And then really, so donations is big, but also we need volunteers. So like, hey, if you watching this and you want to throw us a house party before November 2nd and invite people, hit me up. You want to text message your friends and or, you know, try to give people rides. You want to knock doors, hit us up. Whatever you can do, but definitely donating and outreach. So please do that, and let's make some change.
Marven for Lynn, you're here to hear first. Well, not first. I mean, you heard it here 1,000 times, but you heard it on Grindhouse. Marven for Lynn, you got to support, man. Obviously, like, we all aren't happy. I would assume if you're watching this, you probably aren't happy with the direction the city has been going. Obviously, there's a couple nice things here and there, some murals, some blah, 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 who are, you know, but we got to make sure that the people who are making the murals, the people who are making the change of the city are the people who live in the city. So make sure you turn out to the polls November 2nd. You vote for Marven. And yeah, man, support. You gotta use your voice, man. If you have one, you gotta use it. And this is it's an easy way to do it. So yeah, anyway, thank you guys for catching another episode of the Grindhouse Podcast. This has been episode 76. Want to thank my guests again, Marven and Jonathon. Again, Marven for Lynn. And you guys take care. See you in the next one.
Peace.